Do you believe that a desperate text message sent by mistake in the dead of night could lead to a horrifying forbidden love, where the most powerful man in Chicago turns out to be the biological father of the impoverished girl he rescues, yet they still plunge into each other in a blaze of passion that cannot be extinguished? Horrifyingly, Sarah Thompson, a gaunt single mother huddled in a freezing apartment with no electricity, her 10-month-old daughter crying uncontrollably from hunger, accidentally dialed one wrong digit while begging for $50. And that message landed in the hands of Dominic Rossi, the wealthy, cold-hearted underworld boss who never imagined he would be swept into the darkest emotional tragedy, discovering she is his long-lost daughter, while being unable to suppress the intense desire he feels for his own flesh and blood. Will this forbidden love save or destroy them both? Stay tuned for this shocking story that will push you to the limit right now. Before we dive into this chilling and mysterious story, please remember to subscribe to the channel Alex Truths and like this video. Every subscription, like, and share from you is a huge spiritual gift and an incredibly profound source of motivation for the channel's growth, so we can continue bringing wonderful videos every day to everyone. There would be no greater joy than receiving your love and support through the comments you leave right below this video. Comments sharing your emotions, or telling us which province or city you're living and working in while listening to this story. All right, let's continue together and immerse ourselves in this amazing, captivating story that's filled with deep emotions. In the freezing chill of a late October night in 2025, on Chicago's South Side, where the wind whipped through cracked windows and thin walls like a relentless thief, Sarah Thompson sat huddled on the worn linoleum floor of her tiny Englewood apartment. The power had been cut weeks ago. No sympathy from the utility company for a single mother scraping by on odd teaching substitute jobs that barely covered rent. Emma, her 10-month-old daughter, cried softly from the second-hand crib in the corner, her little belly aching from another bottle thinned with too much water because the last can of Enfamil formula was empty. Sarah's hands trembled as she rocked back and forth, wrapped in a threadbare blanket that smelled of mildew and desperation. She was thin, her cheeks hollow from too many skipped meals, her body weakened by endless nights of cold and worry. Eviction papers lay crumpled on the counter, and the landlord's threats echoed in her mind. Another missed payment, and they were out on the street. Pride had kept her from begging before, but tonight was different. Emma's cries pierced her heart like knives. Sarah picked up her cracked phone, the screen flickering under her shaky fingers. Her brother Mike had helped once or twice, grudgingly. She typed quickly. "Mike, I'm so sorry to ask again. I need $50 for formula. Emma's almost out. I get paid Friday. I'll pay you back. Please." Her thumb hovered, then pressed send without checking the number. One wrong digit in the dim light. She set the phone down, forehead pressed to her knees, tears silent as the city outside held its breath. Minutes dragged like hours. Then, a buzz. "I think you have the wrong number." Sarah's stomach plummeted. Horror washed over her, exposed, humiliated, pleading to a stranger. Her fingers flew. "I'm so sorry. Please ignore. Wrong number." She tossed the phone aside, pulling the blanket tighter, numbness spreading through her chest. Another failure in a life full of them. 3 miles away, in a fortified penthouse overlooking the glittering lights of downtown Chicago, Dominic Rossi stared at his private phone, the one no one had, not press, not rivals, only closest family. He was fair-skinned, sharp-featured, a powerful Italian-American who ran legitimate construction firms and restaurants on the surface, but quietly commanded respect in shadows others feared to tread. Widowed young, childless, haunted by gnawing guilt over losses he couldn't prevent, his wife's death in a rival dispute years ago still tore at him nightly. The text wasn't spam. It was raw, desperate, a mother's plea for her child. It stirred something deep, a violent emotional conflict, remorse for his empty life, a surge of protectiveness he'd buried long ago. Most nights he'd ignore it, but Emma's name, the quiet dignity in promising repayment, it reminded him of what he'd lost, what he'd failed to save. His jaw clenched, guilt consuming him like fire. He typed, "Is your baby okay?" Across town, Sarah stared, confused, fearful. Who asks that? Her voice, if spoken, would be soft, timid. "We'll manage," she replied. "Sorry again." "I can help. No strings," she scoffed inwardly. Strangers don't help like that. But desperation clawed. "Thanks, but I don't take from strangers." "Smart. Call me Dominic now." Suspicion warred with curiosity in her heart, fearful, guarded, yet a tiny spark of hope. That night, as rival crews eyed his territory in tense street standoffs, bold confrontations where words cut sharper than threats, Dominic's men holding lines without chaos, his mind was on her. Guilt gnawed deeper. He'd built an empire, but couldn't fill the void. When she finally sent her payment app, his response was instant. $15,000 transferred. Sarah froze, dizziness hitting like a wave, numbness in her limbs, shock, confusion, deep disorientation, pain in her chest from the unfairness of it all. This couldn't be real. People like her didn't get miracles. "Why?" she typed, voice trembling in her mind. Across the city, Dominic leaned back, heart pounding with an overwhelming surge, fierce, passionate protectiveness, blooming into something deeper, intense from the first raw glimpse of her struggle. Remorse tore at him. He wanted to shield her, this stranger who'd awakened a love he thought dead. "Because no child should go hungry," he replied. "And because someone once needed help and got none." Sarah cried then, quietly, the gap between her pitiful, humiliating poverty and this stranger's wealth tearing her world apart. Absurd unfairness, cold nights, empty cans, now this? Anxiety, fear, curiosity swirled violently inside her. Yet in the stillness, a condensed emotional quiet settled. Maybe, just maybe, the world wasn't entirely cruel. Little did she know, Dominic's inner turmoil raged fiercer, guilt-consuming, remorse violent, a passionate love igniting for the woman whose desperation had pierced his armored heart. Sarah Thompson sat frozen on the cold floor, the cracked phone clutched in her thin, trembling hands, like a lifeline she no longer believed in. The glow of the screen cut through the darkness of her Englewood apartment, illuminating the empty formula can on the counter and the stack of overdue bills that mocked her from every corner. October wind howled outside, slipping through the gaps in the window frame, chilling her bones. Emma had finally quieted into uneasy sleep, her tiny chest rising and falling in shallow breaths, but Sarah could not move. $15,000. The number stared back at her, real and impossible. Her stomach twisted with dizziness, a wave of numbness spreading from her fingertips to her heart. This was not mercy. This was a trick, a cruel joke played by someone who could afford to toy with the desperate. She blinked again and again, waiting for the transfer to disappear, for the app to correct its mistake. But it stayed. $15,000 from someone named Dominic. Her breath came shallow, horror creeping in. Horror at how easily she had accepted, how quickly pride had crumbled. Tears burned hot tracks down her malnourished cheeks. She was 26 years old, a substitute teacher who had once dreamed of full-time classrooms and storytime circles, now reduced to this, begging a stranger in the dark because her baby was hungry. The unfairness of it clawed at her chest, absurd, violent, tearing. Why her? Why now? The world had never been kind. It had taken her parents young, left her with a brother who barely answered, a job that paid too little too late, and a landlord who pounded on the door for rent she did not have. Across the city, in a penthouse fortress high above the glittering lights of the magnificent Mile, Dominic Rossi stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, the phone still in his hand. The skyline stretched before him like a kingdom he had built with blood and cunning, yet tonight it felt hollow. The text thread glowed softly, her last message unanswered. "This is too much. I only needed 50. His jaw clenched, guilt gnawing deeper than it had in years. He had sent the money without thinking, a reflex born of the raw ache her words had stirred. Emma. A child going hungry. It echoed too closely the life he could have had, the wife lost to a rival's bullet, the children they never brought into the world. Remorse consumed him, violent and unrelenting. He had everything: power that made men tremble, wealth that bought silence and loyalty, homes filled with marble and leather and art no one dared touch. Yet he had nothing that mattered. He typed slowly, deliberately. "It's already yours. No catch. One less thing to worry about." His thumb hovered, then sent. Across town, Sarah's phone buzzed again. She stared, confusion deepening into fear. Who spoke like that? Who gave without demand? Her fingers shook as she replied, voice soft, even in text, timid and polite. "Thank you. I don't even know what to say." The response came swift. "You don't have to say anything. Just take care of Emma." She noticed it then, the way her heart stuttered. He knew Emma's name. She had never told him. Panic surged, cold and sharp. She had mentioned her daughter in the first desperate message, but not the name. No, wait, she had. Emma's almost out. Relief and dread warred inside her. He had read carefully. He had cared enough to remember. The realization hit like a physical blow, dizziness returning, her balance swaying, even seated. This stranger had seen her at her lowest, her most humiliating, and instead of turning away, he had reached through the darkness. Dominic set the phone down and paced, the expensive rug silent under his Italian leather shoes. His reflection stared back from the glass. Fair-skinned, sharp-featured, a man who commanded respect in boardrooms and back alleys alike. Tonight, rival crews from the West Side had tested boundaries again, bold confrontations in the shadows of Wicker Park bars. Words exchanged like weapons, threats veiled in civility, his men holding the line without a shot fired. He had handled it effortlessly, power flowing like the Chicago River. Yet none of it filled the void. This woman, this Sarah, had pierced it with a single wrong number text. An overwhelming surge rose in his chest, passionate and intense from the very first moment he had read her plea. Love? No, too soon for the word, but something fierce and protective, burning hotter than anger, deeper than guilt. He wanted to shield her from every cold night, every empty can, every tear. The violence of the feeling terrified him. He had not allowed himself to feel this way since losing everything that mattered. Sarah rocked gently, the blanket pulled tight, her body aching from exhaustion and hunger she refused to satisfy, while Emma needed more. The money sat in her account like a dream she dared not touch. What did he want? Men like him, because she had searched his name now, heart pounding as photos loaded. Dominic Rossi, whispered about in news articles as both philanthropist and shadow king, did not give without taking. Yet his messages held no demand, no hook, only quiet certainty. Just take care of Emma. The words echoed, stirring something she could not name. Curiosity crept past the fear, guarded and tentative. Who was this man who spoke of her daughter with such gentle command? Another buzz. Do you need more? Formula? Diapers? Tell me what Emma needs. Sarah stared, tears falling freely now. The disparity crushed her, the humiliating poverty of her world against the effortless wealth of his. She imagined him in some warm, vast home while she shivered in the dark. Unfair, absurdly, brutally unfair. Yet the offer hung there, sincere. Her fingers moved before pride could stop them. If it's really no strings, she needs Enfamil Gentilese and size 3 diapers. 3 seconds later, transfer confirmed, another $5,000, with a note. Supplies will be delivered tomorrow, organic if possible. The room spun. Sarah dropped the phone, hands covering her mouth to muffle a sob. Shock, confusion, deep disorientation, pain blooming in her chest like a bruise. This was not real. People did not do this. Not for her. Not for a thin, broken woman who could barely keep her child fed. The gap between their worlds yawned wider, a chasm of cold nights and empty promises on her side, warmth and power on his. Quiet, condensed, emotional stillness settled over her then, broken only by Emma's soft breathing. In that hush, something shifted. Sarah Thompson did not sleep that night. She sat on the edge of her sagging mattress, the thin blanket wrapped around her shoulders, staring at the phone as if it might bite her. The apartment was silent, except for the occasional creak of the building settling and the distant wail of a siren cutting through the October darkness. Emma slept fitfully in her crib, a small mercy after a full bottle made possible by the stranger's money. $20,000 now sat in Sarah's account, $15,000 from the first transfer, $5,000 more with the promise of supplies. The numbers felt obscene, a cruel spotlight on her poverty. She was bone thin, her collarbones sharp under the faded t-shirt, her eyes ringed with the purple of endless, sleepless nights. The wind found every crack, every gap, reminding her how powerless she was against the cold, against the world. Morning came gray and unforgiving. A knock at the door jolted her upright, heart slamming against her ribs. No one knocked kindly in this building. The landlord barked, neighbors ignored, and bill collectors left notices. She crept to the peephole, breath shallow. A delivery driver in a crisp uniform stood there, holding 4 large boxes. "Delivery for Sarah Thompson?" he called. Her hands shook as she unchained the door. She signed with a trembling scrawl, and he carried the boxes inside without comment, stacking them in the tiny living room. She waited until he left before tearing them open on the floor. Formula, cases of Enfamil Gentilese, the good kind. Diapers in stacks taller than Emma. Wipes, bottles, soft cotton onesies in pale blues and pinks. Organic purees in neat pouches. Warm blankets that smelled new and clean. At the bottom of the last box, a tiny Chicago Bears jersey, no bigger than her hand, and a plush bald eagle, soft and patriotic. An envelope lay tucked beside it. She opened it with numb fingers. For Emma. She deserves better than barely getting by. Dominic. No logo, no return address. Just those words in strong, certain handwriting. Sarah sank to the floor amid the boxes, the eagle clutched to her chest. Tears came hot and sudden, a sob escaping before she could stop it. The disparity hit like a physical blow. These gifts from a world of abundance, delivered to her crumbling apartment where heat was a memory and hope had long ago frozen over. Why? The question tore at her, violent and confusing. Suspicion coiled tight in her gut. This had to be a game, a debt she could never repay. Yet the jersey, the eagle, thoughtful, American, chosen with care. Curiosity flickered past the fear, guarded and tentative. She snapped a photo of Emma holding the eagle, her daughter's chubby fingers curled around its wing, and sent it without thinking. She loves it. Thank you doesn't feel like enough. The reply came almost instantly. Seeing her happy is enough. Sarah's breath caught. Who was this man? Across the city, Dominic Rossi stood in the shadowed back room of one of his Michigan Avenue restaurants, the air thick with the scent of garlic and marinara. His men flanked him as a representative from a rival West Side crew lingered at the table, words sharp and probing, territory lines, respect, subtle threats wrapped in polite negotiation. Dominic's voice was low, controlled, his fair-skinned face unreadable. The confrontation ended with handshakes that promised peace but guaranteed vigilance. No one crossed Dominic Rossi without consequence, yet he resolved it with words alone, power radiating quietly. As the man left, Dominic's phone buzzed in his pocket. The photo loaded, a tiny baby girl with wide eyes, clutching the eagle he had chosen himself. His chest tightened violently, remorse flooding in waves. He had picked the gifts late last night, pacing his vast penthouse, the city lights mocking his isolation. Guilt gnawed deeper. He had wealth that could buy islands, loyalty that silenced streets, yet he lived in echoes. His wife's face haunted him, the child they never had. This Sarah, this stranger, had awakened something fierce and burning. From the first text, an overwhelming surge had ignited, passionate, intense love for a woman he had never met, a protectiveness that tore at his soul. He wanted to wrap her in safety, shield her from every unjust wind, every humiliating night. The conflict raged. He was a man who commanded fear, yet here he was, undone by a baby's smile. "Why are you doing this?" her next message read, soft and timid even in text. Dominic exhaled slowly, the restaurant noise fading. Because once, someone needed help and didn't get it, because Emma shouldn't know hunger. Truth, partial but raw, he added, and because your strength deserves more than survival. Sarah read it twice, 3 times, dizziness washing over her again. Strength? She felt anything but. The landlord had slipped another notice under the door that morning. Final warning, eviction looming. Absurd unfairness. Supplies arrived while threats mounted. She typed, deleted, typed again. "I looked you up. You're important. Why help someone like me?" Fear laced the words, anxiety sharp. She was powerless, destitute, a substitute teacher drowning in a city that didn't care. His reply took longer. "Importance means nothing if it can't help when it matters. You're not someone like you, you're Sarah, and Emma's mother." The words pierced her, shock and confusion swirling into deep disorientation. Pain bloomed in her chest. How could a powerful man see her when no one else did? Quiet, condensed emotional stillness settled, broken only by Emma's cooing at the new toys. That afternoon, another delivery. Grocery bags filled with fresh fruit, milk, bread, peanut butter, simple American comforts she hadn't tasted in months. A prepaid phone card, warm socks for Emma, and a note. "Eat something, Sarah, please." She cried over apples, the sweetness foreign on her tongue. The gap widened painfully, her malnourished body against his effortless generosity. Dominic, meanwhile, handled another tense standoff near Lincoln Park, rivals testing boundaries with bold stares and veiled challenges. He met them head-on, voice calm, presence commanding respect without escalation. As they backed down, his mind was on her. The love burned hotter, passionate and consuming, tearing at his heart. He had never felt this pull, this need to protect, to cherish. Remorse mingled with it. He had failed others before. He would not fail her. Night fell. Sarah texted again, curious now despite the fear. "How do you know what we need?" "I listen," he wrote. "Tell me more about you." Guarded, she shared fragments, teaching dreams crushed by reality, cold nights, Emma's first smile. Each message drew them closer, trust growing fragile but real. In his penthouse, Dominic read every word, the violent inner conflict raging. He loved her already, intensely, from the depths of his tormented soul. And she had no idea how completely she had captured him. The days blurred into a strange new rhythm for Sarah Thompson, one where Emma's cries were soothed by full bottles and warm blankets, yet the fear never fully left her chest. Late October in 2025 brought biting winds that rattled the thin windows of her Inglewood apartment. But now, at least, there were diapers stacked high and formula lining the shelf. The money from Dominic, $20,000 untouched except for necessities, sat like a foreign weight in her account, a reminder of the chasm between her world and his. She was still thin, her body a map of skipped meals and sleepless nights, her reflection in the cracked mirror showing eyes too old for 26 years. The landlord's final eviction notice had arrived that morning, slipped under the door like a death sentence. Absurd unfairness. Gifts poured in while security crumbled. She had nowhere to go, no family to call. Only Emma and the fragile thread of texts from a man whose name alone made her heart race with equal parts terror and wonder. She typed with trembling fingers. The supplies, they've changed everything. Emma is smiling more, but things here are getting worse. Landlord says we have to leave soon. Her voice in her mind was soft, timid, polite, afraid to demand, afraid to hope. The reply came swiftly. You don't have to face that alone. Tell me about your work. What did you do before Emma? Guarded curiosity won over fear. She shared, haltingly, substitute teaching, loving the children, the joy of reading stories aloud, dreams crushed by low pay and endless applications rejected. Across the city, Dominic Rossi sat in the back of his armored black SUV, the leather seats warm against the chill outside. His driver navigated the bustling streets near the Loop, where rival crews had gathered again. This time, a bold confrontation outside a shared construction site. Men stood toe-to-toe, words flying like challenges, accusations of encroachment, demands for respect. Dominic stepped out, his presence alone shifting the air. Fair-skinned and commanding, he met their leader's glare with calm steel, negotiating boundaries with quiet authority that brooked no argument. The standoff dissolved without escalation, his power evident in the averted eyes and reluctant nods. Yet as he returned to the vehicle, his phone buzzed with her message. Reading of her teaching dreams, her quiet strength amid ruin, the violent inner conflict tore at him anew. Guilt consumed, remorse gnawed like fire. He had empires of construction and restaurants, loyalty bought and earned, yet he could not erase his past failures. His love for her burned hotter, passionate and overwhelming from the very first text, an intense surge that demanded he protect her, claim her world as his to mend. He typed carefully. You're good with people, sharp. I run family businesses, legitimate ones too. Kids of my associates need tutoring, books need reviewing for irregularities, safe place, good pay, childcare on site. No strings beyond the work. Come talk. Just talk. Sarah stared at the screen, dizziness crashing over her. A job? From him? Horror mingled with anxiety. Dominic Rossi, the man whispered about in shadows, offering her a way out. Fear clawed. What did he really want? Yet curiosity heightened, guarded but insistent. The eviction loomed, Emma's future a void. I don't know what to say. Are you sure? Her reply was soft, polite, the words of someone powerless addressing power. Yes, tomorrow, 11 in the morning, North Side compound, safe. Ask for Marco at the gate. Bring Emma. The address followed, a place in Lincoln Park she had only seen from afar. Grand, secure, worlds away from her crumbling building. That night, Sarah paced the tiny apartment, numbness spreading through her limbs. Shock and confusion tore violently inside. Once desperately poor, now invited into wealth's embrace. Pain bloomed in her chest, the humiliating reality of her thin frame, the cold winds that had stolen sleep for months, against this impossible offer. Quiet, condensed emotional stillness fell as she held Emma close, the baby's warmth grounding her amid the storm. Dominic, in his vast penthouse overlooking Lake Michigan, stood at the window, the city lights a testament to his reach. Another tense call had come. Rivals probing again near a shared warehouse. Unexpected demands delivered through intermediaries. He handled it with decisive words, his influence quelling the unrest before it flared. But his mind was on her. The love raged, burning and passionate, a focal point that upended his tormented heart. Remorse for lost years, guilt for what he could have prevented. He would not fail Sarah. He ordered preparations, a nursery suite in the compound, stocked with cribs, toys, a soft cub's blanket, thoughtful, secure. Morning came too soon. Sarah dressed in her cleanest jeans and a thrifted sweater, Emma in a new onesie from the boxes. The bus ride north felt endless, the disparity stark, passing from neglected streets to manicured lawns and high gates. Her heart pounded as the cab, paid for by another anonymous transfer, approached the compound. Guards nodded respectfully, Marco greeting her with professional warmth. "Miss Thompson, Mr. Rossi is expecting you." The grounds were immaculate, buildings blending old Chicago elegance with modern security. Marco led her through hallways of polished wood and subtle luxury, no ostentation, just quiet power. Emma babbled in her carrier, oblivious. They stopped at a door. "He thought this might help," Marco said softly, opening it. Inside was a nursery, fully furnished, sunlight streaming through secure windows, crib with soft linens, changing table, rugs in warm colors, toys including a miniature White Sox cap and more plush animals. Sarah's hand flew to her mouth, tears instant, thoughtful beyond words. Every detail screamed care. Blackout curtains for naps, bottles ready, even a rocking chair that looked handmade. "Why?" she whispered, voice breaking. Marco's gaze was kind. "Because he knows what it's like to need a safe place." 20 minutes later, coffee in hand, real coffee, hot and rich, Sarah sat in a smaller room, Emma asleep beside her. The door opened quietly. Dominic entered. Tall, composed, expensive suit tailored perfectly, yet tired eyes and a face that had not smiled easily in years. Seeing him hit harder than expected, real, more human than the photos. "Sarah," he said, as if her name was natural on his tongue. "Thank you for coming." She stood awkwardly, confusion and fear swirling. "I wasn't sure I should." "You came anyway. That's what matters." He sat across, forearms on the table. "Before anything, you're owed nothing. This isn't charity. I see potential. Tutoring, reviewing records, flexible, fair pay, Emma cared for here." He slid a folder. The number inside made her blink, more than she had earned in a year substituting. Shock tore through her, deep disorientation and pain. From poverty's edge to this, the gap numbed her. "This is real?" "It is." She glanced at Emma, then him. "And the nursery?" A faint smile. "Also real." In that moment, quiet understanding passed. Sarah nodded, tears threatening. The love in Dominic's eyes, passionate, intense, hidden behind composure, burned for her, a woman who had awakened his soul. His inner torment raged. He would protect her, love her, no matter the cost. And Sarah, guarded heart-cracking, felt the first pull toward the man who saw her not as broken, but as worthy. Sarah Thompson's first official day at the Rossi compound began before the sun fully rose over Lake Michigan. The late October light in 2025 filtering soft and golden through the secure windows of her new quarters. She had moved in the night before, quietly, with only 2 duffel bags of belongings and Emma in her carrier, escorted by Marco after the eviction became unavoidable. The landlord had changed the locks without warning, an absurd cruelty that left her standing on the sidewalk in the cold, tears freezing on her cheeks. Dominic's text had come like a lifeline. Come now, you're safe. And so she had, powerless against the pull, her thin frame shivering not just from wind, but from the violent tearing inside. Shock at how far she had fallen, confusion at how quickly a stranger had lifted her. The room given to her was modest but warm, clean lines, a real bed with fresh sheets, a small kitchenette stocked with food she hadn't bought. No luxury for show, just quiet efficiency that spoke of thoughtful power. Emma had a corner nursery adjoining, the same one she had seen during the visit, now hers. Sarah dressed carefully in her best blouse and slacks, hair pulled back, minimal makeup to hide the hollows under her eyes. She was still malnourished, her body protesting the sudden abundance, but Emma thrived already, cooing at the plush eagle on the rug. No one stared as she walked the hallways with Emma in a sling. Staff nodded respectfully. "Welcome back, Miss Thompson," as if she belonged. Marco met her with coffee, real and steaming. "Your office is ready." Emma's space, too. He led her to a sleek workspace overlooking the grounds, dual monitors waiting, a glass partition revealing the nursery where Emma played with blocks under a caregiver's watch. Sarah sat slowly, hands hovering over the keyboard. She hadn't worked consistently in over a year, hadn't felt useful since the substitute gigs dried up. But as she opened the files, tutoring schedules for associates' children, ledgers for legitimate businesses like restaurants and construction, something familiar stirred. Her mind clicked into gear, patterns in numbers, inconsistencies in records. She tutored a shy 10-year-old that afternoon, reading stories aloud, watching the child's face light up. It felt right. Good. By evening, reviewing a construction ledger, she spotted it. Not glaring, but there. Discrepancies in vendor payments, small amounts rerouted subtly, patterns hidden in noise. Her stomach tightened. This wasn't accident. Dominic Rossi watched from afar that day, handling tensions that simmered on the edges of his world. A bold confrontation erupted near a shared Southside site. Rival representatives appearing unexpectedly, words sharp with accusation over contracts and territories. Dominic arrived personally, stepping from his SUV with calm authority, fair-skinned features set in unyielding lines. The standoff was tense, voices raised in veiled threats, but he resolved it with measured words and undeniable presence. No escalation, just boundaries reaffirmed. His men stood ready, but his power lay in the quiet command that made others back down. Yet his thoughts were on her. Seeing Sarah settle in through reports, Emma happy, Sarah focused, ignited the burning love deeper. Passionate, intense from the first desperate text, it tore at his heart now with violent conflict. Remorse gnawed. He had wealth that reshaped lives, yet his own remained empty, haunted by losses he couldn't prevent. Guilt consumed, he wanted her not just safe, but cherished, wrapped in his protection forever. The surge overwhelmed, a focal point that numbed all else. That afternoon, he stopped by her office unannounced, sleeves rolled on his black shirt, looking more approachable than his reputation allowed. "Settling in?" he asked, glancing through the glass at Emma napping. Sarah nodded, a small smile escaping. "Better than I imagined. Thank you. Again." Her voice was soft, timid, polite, gratitude laced with lingering fear. He noticed her screen. "Already deep in the ledgers?" She hesitated. "There's something off. Vendor payouts not matching project codes. Small, but repeating." Dominic's expression shifted, thoughtful, not surprised. "You see it fast." "It's not well hidden," she said quietly. Curiosity heightened in her, guarded but pulling. Who was this man who trusted her with his world? He nodded once. "Keep looking," quietly. Then, softer. "You're doing good, Sarah." The words warmed her, shock rippling through. Someone powerful seeing her skill, not her brokenness. Dizziness touched her edges, the disparity painful. Her past of cold nights and humiliation against this sudden purpose. That night, back in her quarters, Sarah worked late, Emma asleep nearby. The unfairness hit again. Substitute paychecks bounced, eviction without mercy. Now this? Quiet, condensed emotional stillness wrapped her as she traced patterns deeper. Payments to a shell account, masked cleverly. Anxiety crept, fear of what it meant. But also a spark, usefulness, after powerlessness. Dominic paced his private study, another tense call resolved, rivals probing near a restaurant, unexpected demands met with his decisive influence. As peace held, his inner torment raged. Love for her burned consuming, passionate upheaval tearing him apart. He had rescued her from the brink, yet wanted more, to hold her, heal every wound. Guilt and remorse violently conflicted. Could a man like him deserve her light? By week's end, Sarah had a rhythm. Mornings tutoring bright children, afternoons digging ledgers, evenings with Emma in safety. Staff brought lunch unasked, grilled chicken, vegetables, simple and nourishing. She ate, body slowly strengthening. But the discovery grew. The siphoning was sophisticated, someone inside diverting funds slowly. One evening, Dominic appeared again. Found more? She handed him notes, voice steady but soft. It's patterned, shell company, someone knows the system well. His jaw tightened slightly. Good eye. Praise warmed her, confusion and curiosity swirling into deeper pull. Shock at her new reality, protected, valued, tore violently inside, numbness giving way to tentative hope. Through the glass, Emma stirred, babbling happily. Dominic's gaze softened, the burning love a fierce anchor in his tormented heart. Sarah felt it too, guarded walls cracking under the intensity of his care. The gap between her pitiful past and this present numbed and healed in turns, evoking tears and quiet moments. She was catching up, stepping into something real. And Dominic, watching her bloom, knew his world had shifted forever on a wrong number. By the second week in the Rossi compound, Sarah Thompson had carved out a fragile rhythm amid the warmth and security that still felt like a dream borrowed from someone else's life. Late October winds howled outside the fortified walls, but inside, Emma napped peacefully in the nursery, surrounded by toys and soft light. Sarah's office had become a sanctuary, dual screens glowing, coffee steaming, the glass partition offering constant glimpses of her daughter. She was gaining weight slowly, the hollows in her cheeks filling, sleep coming easier without the constant dread of eviction or empty cans. Yet the memory of her poverty clung like frost. Thin arms that once shook mixing watered formula, nights curled against cold that seeped into bones. The humiliating powerlessness of a woman alone with a child in a city that turned away. She treated the work like a mission. Tutoring in mornings, children of associates, bright and eager, filled her with quiet joy. Afternoons were for ledgers, construction bids, restaurant receipts, protection arrangements masked as consulting fees. She dug deeper into the discrepancies, patterns emerging like cracks in ice. Payments routed through a shell company named Harbor Holdings LLC, amounts varying but always under thresholds, tied to non-existent projects. Over quarters, they added up, subtle, strategic extraction. One gray afternoon, cross-referencing old personnel files for context, Sarah froze. A name in a scanned document, her mother's maiden name, linked to a decades-old associate file. Heart-pounding, she dug further. Restricted access yielded with her clearance. Photos loaded slowly. A younger Dominic beside a woman who looked achingly familiar. Notes on a brief relationship, ended when the woman married another. A hidden paternity test, buried deep. Positive. Sarah's world tilted, dizziness crashing like a wave. Numbness spread through her limbs, balance lost, even seated. Shock, confusion, deep disorientation, pain tearing violently inside. She was Dominic's daughter. The man who had saved her from the brink was her father. Tears blurred the screen. Horror and anxiety surged. All this time, his generosity, his care. Was it blood or something more? The unfairness clawed. Her mother's early death from illness untreated due to poverty. Her own childhood of absence and struggle. Now this revelation in a place of wealth she had never known. Quiet, condensed emotional stillness fell, broken only by Emma's distant babble. Across the compound, Dominic Rossi stood in a secure meeting room, facing representatives from a rival North Side faction. The confrontation had erupted unexpectedly, claims over a shared trucking route, bold demands delivered in clipped tones. Men flanked him, tension thick, words cutting sharp without crossing lines. Dominic's presence dominated, fair-skinned, composed, voice low and unyielding. He negotiated with precision, power radiating until concessions were made, peace held by the weight of his reputation alone. As they left, his phone remained silent, no word from Sarah yet. His love for her burned consuming, passionate and intense from the first wrong number, a focal point that tore at his tormented heart. Remorse gnawed deeper daily. He had never known of the child, had failed to protect the woman he once loved, indirectly dooming Sarah to the poverty that haunted her. Guilt raged violent. He rescued her now, but too late for so much. That evening, Sarah could not wait. She gathered printouts, hands shaking, and walked the hallways to his private office. She did not knock. Urgency overrode caution. Dominic looked up, surprise softening to concern at her face. "Sarah?" She closed the door, voice soft but breaking. "Why didn't you tell me?" She slid the paternity file across. His expression shattered, jaw tightening, eyes darkening with pain. He had known for weeks, pieced it from her background check, buried it in hope and fear. "I suspected," he said quietly, voice raw, then confirmed. "I didn't know how to say it. Your mother, I cared for her deeply. When she chose another, I stepped back. I never knew about you." Remorse consumed him, violent conflict tearing inside. The daughter he never held, the woman he loved now in ways that tormented his soul. The burning passion intensified, fatherly protectiveness twisted with the overwhelming surge that had ignited from her first text. Sarah sank into a chair, dizziness returning, numbness and pain blooming. All this, the help, the job, because of blood? Tears fell. "I thought maybe you saw me, not pity." Horror at the revelation, anxiety over what it meant. Her poverty flashed, cold nights without a father, mother's struggles alone, now explained in cruel absence. "No," Dominic said fiercely, stepping closer but stopping short. "It started with the text, your strength, your plea for Emma. It pierced me before I knew. The blood, it makes it deeper, but not the reason." His heart tore violently, guilt for lost years, remorse for failures, love burning passionate for the woman before him, daughter and more in his upheaval. She stared, confusion swirling into guarded curiosity. How do I believe that? Yet in his eyes, she saw truth, torment mirroring her own. Quiet stillness settled, emotions condensing into something raw. Outside, another tense standoff brewed. Rivals testing near a restaurant, unexpected envoys arriving with pointed questions. Dominic excused himself briefly, handling it with decisive calm, his influence quelling unrest. Returning, he found her waiting, the gap between their worlds painfully evident, her past misery against his power to mend. "I failed you both," he whispered. "Let me make it right now." Sarah's walls cracked further, shock giving way to tentative pull. The revelation numbed and healed in turns, evoking tears. She was his daughter, rescued not by chance but fate. And Dominic, heart raging with intense love and remorse, knew protecting her would redefine his empire. The revelation hung in the air of Dominic Rossi's private office, like smoke that refused to clear, thick and choking. Sarah Thompson sat across from him, the paternity file open between them like an accusation. Her hands trembled in her lap, thin fingers twisting the hem of her sweater, the same sweater she had worn through countless cold nights in her old apartment, when wind sliced through cracks and hunger kept sleep at bay. Now, in this warm room of polished wood and quiet power, the past crashed against the present with violent force. She was his daughter. The man who had pulled her from destitution, who had given her and Emma safety, was the father she had never known. The one whose absence had left her mother struggling alone, dying too young from illnesses untreated, leaving Sarah to scrape through a childhood of patched clothes and empty refrigerators. "Why now?" she whispered, voice soft and timid, breaking on the words. Tears streamed down her cheeks, hot and unrelenting. "All those years, I needed a father. We needed help." Horror and anxiety twisted inside her, fear of what this truth meant. The unfairness tore violently. Her pitiful, humiliating poverty, malnourished body, sleep-deprived eyes, nights curled around Emma for warmth, while he had lived in wealth that could have changed everything. Dominic stood frozen, fair-skinned face pale, eyes dark with torment. Guilt consumed him like fire, gnawing deeper than any rival's threat. He had loved her mother fiercely once. A brief flame ended when she chose stability over his dangerous world. He had never known of the child. Remorse raged violent in his chest. The daughter lost to him, raised in suffering he could have prevented. Yet woven through the fatherly ache was the burning love that had ignited from her first desperate text, passionate, intense, overwhelming surge for the woman she had become. The conflict tore at his heart savagely. She was blood, yet the pull felt deeper, forbidden, confusing his soul into knots. "I didn't know," he said, voice raw, stepping closer but stopping as if afraid to shatter her further. "If I had, Sarah, I would have moved the city for you both." His hands clenched at his sides, the power that commanded streets useless here. Outside, reports came of another tense standoff, rivals appearing unexpectedly near a construction site, bold words challenging boundaries. Dominic had handled it earlier with calm authority, his presence alone forcing retreat, but now it felt distant. His world was crumbling in this room. Sarah rose unsteadily, dizziness washing over her, numbness spreading. "You say it started with the text, before you knew." Her voice trembled, polite even in pain. "But now, everything feels tainted. Was it pity? Guilt?" Shock and confusion swirled into deep disorientation, pain blooming sharp in her chest. From desperately poor to this revelation, protected by the father who never was, loved in ways she could sense but not name. The gap numbed her, his effortless wealth against her past misery. "No," Dominic said fiercely, closing the distance carefully. "It was you, your strength, your plea for Emma. It pierced me first. The blood. It explains the pull, but doesn't create it." His eyes searched hers, torment plain. The forbidden spark flickered, fatherly protectiveness twisting into something electric, intense, burning hotter. He fought it violently inside, remorse and guilt clashing with the passionate love that demanded he hold her, heal every wound. She backed away, balance swaying. "I can't process this." Tears fell faster. Quiet, condensed emotional stillness settled between them, heavy and aching. Emma's soft cry echoed from the nursery monitor, grounding them both. That night, Sarah lay awake in her quarters, Emma asleep beside her. The revelation tore relentlessly. Memories of childhood hunger, mother's weary smiles hiding pain, now explained by a father's unknown existence. Absurd unfairness. He had power to reshape lives while she endured cold and humiliation. Anxiety and fear gripped her, curiosity guarded but pulling. What did he feel now? Dominic paced his penthouse, city lights mocking his isolation. Another confrontation resolved late, rivals probing near a restaurant, unexpected envoys met with his decisive calm, influence quelling unrest. But here, alone, the inner conflict raged savagely. He loved her as daughter, yet the surge from the beginning felt deeper, forbidden flames licking at his tormented heart. Guilt for the past, remorse for failures, he would burn the world to make it right. Days blurred. Sarah avoided him, focusing on work and Emma, but the pull grew. In quiet moments watching her daughter play, the spark ignited, longing for the father she never had, mixed with the intense care he showed. One evening, unable to bear the distance, she returned to his office. "We need to talk," she said softly, voice timid. He looked up, exhaustion and hope warring in his eyes. "Anything." She closed the door, the air charged. "The embezzlement. It's Victor Kane, isn't it? Your underboss. The patterns lead to him." Work as anchor amid chaos. Dominic nodded slowly. "I suspected, but you, seeing it confirms." Pride flickered through his torment, for his daughter's sharpness. "And us?" she whispered, stepping closer. The forbidden spark flared, eyes meeting, emotions condensing into electric stillness. His hand rose, hesitating, then gently touching her arm. The contact jolted them both, dizziness and pain surging in her, violent conflict in him. "Sarah," his voice broke. The love burned overwhelming, paternal twisted with passionate intensity, tearing his heart apart. Remorse flooded. He had failed her once. Now this forbidden pull threatened everything. She didn't pull away. Tears fell, but curiosity and need won. "I feel something too. It's wrong, confusing." Shock at her words, numbness giving way to burning response. In that moment, barriers cracked. The fragile bridge between father and daughter held for only a few days, trembling under the weight of unspoken tensions and the forbidden spark that neither Sarah Thompson nor Dominic Rossi dared name aloud. Late October in 2025 had given way to the first true bite of November, the Chicago wind sharper now, rattling the secure windows of the compound like a warning. Sarah threw herself into the evidence against Victor Kane, compiling files late into the nights, proof of the embezzlement, the shell company, the ghost approvals. It was safer than facing the storm inside her, the revelation of blood, the electric pull toward the man who was both savior and father, the violent tearing between gratitude and confusion that left her numb and aching. She had been powerless once, thin, malnourished, curled on cold floors while Emma cried from hunger. And now, in this world of warmth and protection, the memory humiliated her still. Every full meal, every safe night felt borrowed, tainted by the forbidden intensity growing between them. Victor Kane struck on a gray afternoon when Dominic was away, resolving yet another tense confrontation. Rivals from the west side had appeared unexpectedly outside one of the legitimate construction offices downtown. Bold demands over territory lines, words laced with veiled threats. Dominic met them personally, stepping from his vehicle with calm authority, fair-skinned features unreadable. The standoff crackled, accusations, posturing, men shifting weight but never crossing the line. His voice cut through, low and commanding, influence alone forcing retreat. Peace held, but barely. While he was gone, Sarah worked in her office, Emma napping nearby. A message pinged on the internal system, supposedly from Marco. "Need you in the East Wing storage for old files. Urgent." Trusting, she went, leaving Emma with the caregiver. The hallway felt longer than usual, quieter. As she turned a corner, hands seized her, strong, sudden. a cloth pressed over her mouth, chemical scent sharp. She struggled, dizziness crashing instantly, numbness flooding limbs. Horror surged. This couldn't happen here, in the place of safety. Her last thought before darkness was Emma. When she woke, bound in a dim warehouse far from the compound, cold concrete seeping through her clothes, Victor Kane stood over her. Tall, polished, ambitious eyes cold. Emma was there too, in a portable crib nearby, fussing but unharmed, for now. "You were a mistake," Victor said smoothly. "A wrong number that became a problem." Sarah's heart pounded, anxiety and fear tearing violently. Powerless again, thin wrists raw against ropes, the old humiliation flooding back. "Dominic will come," she whispered, voice soft, timid even in terror. Victor smiled thinly. "That's the point." He held a phone, recording a message. Dominic must step down, dissolve certain operations, or Sarah and Emma would pay. The demand sent, he left her in darkness, guards outside. Across the city, Dominic received the video in his SUV, returning from the confrontation. Sarah bound, frightened, Emma crying softly. His world shattered. Guilt consumed like acid. He had failed to protect her again, his daughter, the woman whose forbidden pull burned in his soul. Remorse raged violent, inner torment peaking. The love that had ignited from her first text, now a blazing inferno, passionate, intense, overwhelming. Fatherly desperation twisted with deeper need. He would raise everything to bring her home. Marco confirmed the betrayal. Victor had allies inside, a small faction greedy for power. Dominic mobilized quietly, influence rippling through streets. Another tense standoff erupted as he moved, Victor's men blocking routes, unexpected roadblocks with pointed questions. Dominic met one group head-on near the river, voice deadly calm, presence forcing passage without escalation. His power held lines, but time bled. In the warehouse, Sarah rocked as much as ropes allowed, tears silent. The cold bit deep, echoing old nights, wind through cracks, empty cans, humiliating pleas to strangers. Absurd unfairness, rescued into safety, now stolen back into fear. Anxiety clawed, fear for Emma numbing her, yet in quiet, condensed emotional stillness, she clung to Dominic's face, the tormented eyes that saw her fully. The forbidden spark gave strength. He would come. Dominic did not sleep. In his war room, maps and loyal men surrounded him, plans precise. The love tore savagely. He had built an empire of respect and quiet force, yet for her, he felt powerless. Guilt for the past, lost years, her mother's suffering, mingled with the burning need to hold her, protect her as father and more. The conflict raged, confusing and violent. Hours dragged. Victor's deadline loomed. Sarah whispered to Emma through the crib bars, voice soft, polite even in despair. "It's okay, baby. He'll come." But doubt crept, dizziness returning in waves, shock at the betrayal, confusion over her feelings for Dominic, blood and forbidden flame intertwined. Dominic launched the rescue at dusk, personally leading. A final confrontation outside the warehouse, Victor's outer guards challenging boldly, words sharp with demands. Dominic faced them, authority radiating, influence quelling resistance as loyal men secured perimeter. No chaos, just decisive pressure. Inside, he found her. Bursting through, he cut her bonds himself, hands trembling. Sarah collapsed into him, sobs breaking. Emma reached from the crib, safe. Dominic held them both, the embrace fierce, fatherly desperation and passionate intensity surging. "I'm here," he whispered, voice raw. "Never again." In that moment, amid rescue's chaos, the forbidden spark flared brighter. Sarah clung, dizziness and pain giving way to overwhelming surge. Once desperately poor, now held by the man whose love reshaped her world. Dominic's heart tore violently. Remorse, guilt, burning love, clashing in torment. Victor had betrayed them, but in saving her, Dominic knew the cost. Their bond, forbidden and intense, would define everything now. They emerged into night, safe at last, but the betrayal's shadow lingered, the spark between them burning hotter, tearing inner worlds apart with confusing, numbing intensity. Sarah, once powerless in cold poverty, now protected by a love both paternal and forbidden. Dominic, wealthy and powerful, tormented by the depth of what he felt. The reckoning had escalated, and neither could turn back. The warehouse door exploded inward with a controlled breach that shook the concrete floor, but no gunfire followed, only the thunder of Dominic Rossi's voice cutting through the darkness like a blade. Sarah, one word, raw and ragged, carrying every ounce of the torment that had been devouring him for hours. He found her in the far corner, ropes cut away by his own shaking hands, Emma already cradled safe against Marco's chest outside the circle of light. Sarah's legs gave out the instant the last knot fell. She would have hit the ground if Dominic hadn't caught her, arms of steel wrapping around her thin, trembling body, as though she were made of glass and fire at the same time. The first thing she felt was heat, real, living heat, pouring from him into her frozen skin. The second thing was the storm inside his chest, his heart pounding so violently she could feel it through his shirt, through her own ribs, as if their hearts had decided to beat as one. He was shaking. The most powerful man in Chicago was shaking. "You're safe," he rasped against her hair, voice breaking on every syllable. I have you both." Sarah tried to speak, but only a broken sound came out, half sob, half something wilder. She buried her face in his neck, breathing him in, expensive cologne, gun oil, and the metallic scent of barely contained fury. Her fingers clawed at his back, thin and desperate, remembering every cold night she had spent alone, every humiliating moment of powerlessness, every time she had whispered to Emma that everything would be all right while knowing it was a lie. Now the lie was over. Dominic lifted her effortlessly, carrying her out into the cold November air where his men stood in perfect formation. Loyal soldiers who had swept the warehouse in minutes, Victor's traitors already subdued and bound. Another confrontation had tried to form outside, Victor's last desperate allies appearing in cars, blocking the exit with bold threats and demands. Dominic had stepped forward alone, fair-skinned face carved from ice, voice low and lethal. One sentence from him and they had scattered like leaves. His power had never been more absolute, never more terrifying, never more beautiful to her. Back at the compound, in the private medical suite that looked more like a luxury hospital than anything Sarah had ever seen, doctors checked them both. Minor bruises on her wrists, a small cut on Dominic's shoulder where a blade had grazed him during the breach. He had taken it without flinching. Emma slept through everything, exhausted but unharmed. And then they were alone. The door closed with a soft click. The room was dim, lit only by the city glow through floor-to-ceiling windows. Sarah stood in the center, wrapped in one of Dominic's shirts because her own clothes had been torn and filthy. She was drowning in it, the sleeves past her fingertips, the hem brushing mid-thigh. And yet, she had never felt more protected in her life. Dominic hadn't moved from the doorway. He was staring at her as though she might vanish if he blinked. Blood still stained the edge of his white shirt. His hands opened and closed at his sides. "Sarah," he said again, and this time her name sounded like a prayer and a curse. Something inside her snapped, the last thread holding back the storm. She crossed the room in 3 steps and crashed into him. Not a gentle collision, a violent, desperate one. Her mouth found his before either of them could think. before the word father could rise up and choke them both. The kiss was not soft. It was not careful. It was every cold night, every hungry dawn, every tear she had swallowed alone exploding between them. It was every year he had lived without her, every failure, every ghost that haunted his empire. It was guilt and redemption and forbidden fire finally set free. Dominic groaned, a sound torn from the deepest part of him, and lifted her against the wall, hands fierce on her waist, her thighs, anywhere he could touch to prove she was real. The kiss turned punishing, then reverent, then punishing again. Teeth scraped, tongues clashed, breath mingled in broken gasps. 26 years of her loneliness against his decades of iron control, both shattered in the same instant. "I'm sorry," he rasped against her mouth, over and over. "I'm sorry I wasn't there. I'm sorry I left you in the cold. I'm sorry." "Stop," she sobbed, fingers tangled in his hair, pulling him closer. "Just don't stop touching me. Please don't ever stop." He carried her to the bed without breaking the kiss, laying her down like something sacred and breakable at the same time. Their clothes fell away in frantic urgency, his shirt buttons scattering, her borrowed one yanked over her head. Skin to skin for the first time, and the contrast nearly undid them both. Her body still carrying the faint marks of poverty, sharp hip bones, ribs visible beneath healing flesh, against the hard, powerful lines of a man who had never known hunger. Every touch was worship and apology. Every kiss was possession and surrender. When he finally sank into her, they both cried out, raw, broken sounds that held nothing back. The rhythm was fierce, almost violent in its honesty. Years of absence, of cold nights and empty arms, finally filled. Afterward, they lay tangled in sheets that cost more than her old apartment's rent. Sweat cooling, heart slowing. Dominic held her so tightly it should have hurt, but it didn't. His face was buried in her neck, breath ragged. "I love you," he whispered against her skin, voice hoarse with everything he had never said. "God help me, I love you in ways I don't have names for. As my daughter, as my salvation, as the only woman who has ever brought me to my knees." Sarah's fingers traced the scar on his shoulder, the fresh cut from tonight. Tears slipped silently into his hair. "I was so cold," she said, voice small and wondering. "For so long, and now I'm burning." He pulled back just enough to look at her, eyes fierce and wet. Never again, never cold again, never hungry, never alone. I swear it on everything I am. The forbidden spark had become an inferno, passionate, explosive, all-consuming. Father, protector, lover, lines blurred beyond recognition in the fire they had ignited. Guilt would come later. Remorse would try to claw its way back in. But in this moment, in the quiet after the storm, there was only the overwhelming surge of love that had started with a wrong number and ended with two broken souls, finally perfectly whole. Outside, Chicago slept under November stars, unaware that its most powerful man had just surrendered his heart completely to the woman he had rescued from its coldest shadows. And inside, wrapped in each other's arms, Sarah Thompson, no longer destitute, no longer powerless, finally understood what it felt like to be loved beyond reason, beyond blood, beyond redemption itself. The days following the rescue passed in a haze of medical checks, quiet rooms, and the kind of silence that follows a storm too violent to name. November in 2025 had settled over Chicago like a heavy blanket, the wind off Lake Michigan carrying the promise of snow. Sarah Thompson moved through the compound like a ghost, Emma in her arms more often than not, the baby's warmth the only thing keeping the cold memories at bay. The bruises on her wrists had faded to yellow, but the ones inside remained raw and open. She avoided mirrors. When she caught her reflection by accident, She saw the same thin woman who had once mixed watered-down formula on a freezing floor, only now dressed in clothes that cost more than a month's rent in her old life. The disparity no longer shocked her. It tortured her. Every soft blanket, every full meal, every locked gate that kept the world out felt like a reminder of how far she had fallen before Dominic lifted her up, and how completely she now belonged to him. Victor Kane's betrayal had cracked the foundation of everything Dominic Rossi had built. In the week that followed, the empire underwent a cleansing unlike any in its history. Not with chaos in the streets, Dominic would not allow that, but with surgical precision that left no room for doubt. It began with quiet meetings in back rooms of legitimate businesses. Associates who had waveiled, men who had looked away while Victor plotted. They were called in one by one. Some left with new assignments far from Chicago. Others simply disappeared from the organization, their influence quietly erased. Rivals sensed weakness and tested boundaries. A bold confrontation outside a North Side restaurant where West Side representatives appeared uninvited, words sharp with opportunity. Dominic met them personally, standing in the cold without a coat, fair-skinned face carved from stone. The standoff lasted 20 minutes, voices raised, threats veiled in questions about changing leadership, but ended when Dominic spoke once, low and final. They left without finishing their drinks. Another incident near a construction site, vehicles blocking access, men lingering with pointed stares. Dominic arrived with only Marco, stepped out into the wind, and ended it with 3 sentences. His power had always been quiet, but now it carried the weight of a man who had almost lost everything. No one pushed further. Sarah watched from windows, Emma on her hip. The man who commanded respect with a look was the same one who had carried her out of that warehouse, who had kissed her like she was both salvation and damnation. The forbidden fire between them had not cooled. It had settled into something deeper, more dangerous. They moved around each other carefully in public, but in private, they burned. Nights found them in his penthouse suite, the city spread beneath them like a kingdom he had nearly lost. The first time after the rescue, he had been gentle, too gentle, as if afraid she would break. Sarah had not wanted gentle. She had wanted to feel alive after being so close to death. She had wanted to erase the warehouse cold with his heat. They learned each other's bodies like maps of territories won and lost. His hands that could end negotiations with a gesture, traced the faint stretch marks on her stomach from carrying Emma alone, from nights when food was a choice between her and her daughter. He kissed every scar of her poverty, as if he could erase them. She learned the weight of his guilt in the way he held her afterward, face buried in her neck, whispering apologies for years he hadn't been there. "I should have found you sooner," he would murmur against her skin, voice raw. "I should have known." "You found me when I needed you most," she would answer, fingers in his hair. But the words tasted like half-truths, because the needing had never stopped, and now it had twisted into something neither of them knew how to name. The evidence she had gathered before the kidnapping, in those frantic days of discovery, became the blade that finished Victor. Federal authorities received anonymous packages, ledgers, transfer records, communications that painted a clear picture of embezzlement on a massive scale. Victor was arrested quietly, his polished facade cracking in a federal building downtown. The news called it financial misconduct at high levels. They never mentioned the deeper betrayal, the attempt on Sarah and Emma's lives. Dominic made sure of that. With Victor gone, the cleansing continued. Dominic restructured everything. More legitimate businesses, less shadow work. Construction expanded. Restaurants flourished. The street operations that remained were run with stricter codes, cleaner lines. He did it for her, for them, for the daughter he had failed for 26 years and now refused to fail again. Sarah watched the changes with something like awe. The man who had once operated in gray areas was pulling his empire into the light, piece by careful piece. When she asked why, curious, guarded, still half afraid to believe, he answered simply, "Because you deserve better than what I was. Both of you do." The forbidden nature of their love became its own torment. In quiet moments, guilt would surface, his most of all. He would pull away after they made love, staring at the ceiling as if answers were written there. "I'm your father," he would whisper into the dark, voice breaking. "This is—" "Don't," she would cut in, soft but fierce, turning to him. "Don't say it's wrong. Not when it feels like the only right thing I've ever had." But the conflict raged in both of them. For Sarah, it was the terror of losing herself completely. Once desperately poor and powerless, now consumed by a love that both healed and overwhelmed. For Dominic, it was the violent clash between paternal instinct and passionate desire, between the need to protect his daughter and the need to possess the woman who had become his entire world. One night, after another confrontation resolved, this one at a shared warehouse where rivals had tried to claim abandoned territory, Dominic came to her covered in November cold. He had handled it himself, standing in the wind until the others backed down, his influence absolute. When he entered their rooms, Sarah was waiting. She didn't speak, just crossed to him and started unbuttoning his coat with trembling fingers. The kiss that followed was desperate, almost violent in its intensity, teeth and tongues and hands that clutched like drowning people. They made it to the bedroom without breaking apart, clothes falling away like shed skins. Afterward, lying tangled and spent, Dominic traced patterns on her back, slow, reverent circles that spoke what words could not. "I used to think power was everything," he said quietly. "Control, respect, fear when necessary. But none of it meant anything until you." Sarah pressed her face to his chest, listening to his heartbeat. "And I thought survival was everything, getting through one more day, one more cold night. But this," she gestured between them, voice catching, "this is living." The empire emerged stronger from the cleansing, cleaner lines, legitimate growth, loyalty forged in fire. Victor's allies scattered or pledged renewed allegiance. Rivals tested and found new boundaries, unyielding as steel. And in the heart of it all, two people who should never have found each other, separated by blood and circumstance, united by a wrong number and a desperate plea, built something new from the ashes of betrayal. Sarah Thompson, once destitute and powerless, now stood at the center of Chicago's most powerful family, not as a victim rescued, but as its beating heart. Dominic Rossi, once a man armored in isolation and guilt, now lived for the woman who was both his greatest sin and his only redemption. The reckoning was complete. The empire stood purified. And in the quiet spaces between empire business and bedtime stories for Emma, they learned that love, real, messy, forbidden love, could burn bright enough to light even the darkest paths home. Months slipped by after the cleansing, and Chicago moved into a mild spring that felt like forgiveness. The Rossi empire had changed, no longer shadowed by old debts or treacherous allies. Dominic Rossi had steered it toward legitimate ventures, construction projects that rebuilt neighborhoods, restaurants that fed communities, foundations that quietly paid medical bills for families who reminded him too much of Sarah's past. Rivals still tested boundaries from time to time. A bold confrontation outside a newly opened community center, words sharp with old grievances. But Dominic met them with the same calm authority, his presence alone ending disputes before they began. His power was no longer feared in darkness, it was respected in daylight. Sarah Thompson, once thin and hollow-eyed from nights of cold wind and empty formula cans, now carried a quiet glow. Her body had filled out with regular meals and sleep unbroken by fear. Emma toddled through sunlit rooms, chasing plush toys and laughing at Marco's gentle games. The compound had become home, not a fortress. Sarah worked alongside Dominic, her sharp mind shaping policies that ensured no child in their extended family would ever know hunger. The disparity that once tore at her past poverty against his wealth, had softened into something else. Gratitude, yes, but also partnership. Yet the love between them remained the most complicated truth of all. It was not simple. It never would be. In quiet moments, guilt would rise like smoke, Dominic's most of all. He would watch Sarah reading to Emma and feel the violent clash inside. The father who had failed her for 26 years, and the man who loved her with a passion that consumed him entirely. The forbidden nature of it tore at his heart nightly. Remorse gnawed. How could he deserve this happiness when he had left her to suffer so long? Sarah felt it too. Some nights she would wake gasping, remembering the warehouse cold, the ropes, the terror of almost losing Emma. In those moments she would reach for Dominic, needing his warmth to chase away ghosts. Their lovemaking shifted with their moods, sometimes gentle and reverending, mapping every scar of her past with kisses, sometimes desperate and fierce, as if they could burn away the wrongness of how they began. Afterward, they held each other in the dark, whispering truths neither had dared say in daylight. "I was so cold," she would murmur against his chest, "for so long, and now you're home," he would finish, voice rough with everything he carried. "You're finally home." They learned to live with the complexity. Love, they discovered, was not always clean or simple. It could be born in darkness, a wrong number in the night, and still grow into something beautiful. It could transcend blood and circumstance, wealth and poverty, past failures and present grace. Dominic taught Sarah that power used rightly could protect and heal. Sarah taught Dominic that forgiveness, given freely, without condition, was the greatest strength of all. One spring evening, they walked along the Lake Michigan shore at sunset, Dominic, Sarah, and Emma between them holding both their hands. The city glittered behind them, no longer a place of cold nights and empty promises, but a home they had built together. Dominic stopped walking and turned to Sarah, taking both her hands in his. "I spent years building an empire," he said quietly, thinking that was what mattered: control, respect, legacy. "But none of it meant anything until you," his voice caught. "You and Emma, you're my real legacy, my real home." Sarah's eyes filled. "I spent years just surviving," she whispered, "one day at a time, one cold night after another. I never dared dream of more." She squeezed his hands. "You gave me more than safety. You gave me love that doesn't care about where I came from or what I didn't have. You gave me a father, and something deeper I never expected." They stood in silence as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in fire. Emma laughed at the waves, oblivious to the weight of the moment. When they kissed, it was slow and reverent, no longer desperate, but certain, a promise. Later, in the quiet of their rooms, they made plans, not for empire or survival, but for family. Simple things. Emma's first birthday party with real cake. Weekends at the lake house Dominic had bought just for them. Teaching Emma to read the same way Sarah once dreamed of teaching classrooms full of children. They would build a foundation in her mother's name, scholarships for single mothers, formula banks for families in need, knowledge that hardship didn't define worth, lessons in compassion that money couldn't buy, education as the bridge out of poverty. Love, they learned, didn't see skin color or bank accounts. It didn't care about past mistakes or forbidden lines. It simply was, fierce and healing and true. Knowledge shaped their choices. Lessons learned from pain guided their future. Education, in books and in life, became their gift to Emma and to others. Knowledge that second chances existed. Lessons in forgiveness. Education about the kind of love that rebuilt broken things. Sarah Thompson, once destitute and powerless, now stood tall beside the man who had rescued her, not just from poverty, but from loneliness. Dominic Rossi, once armored in isolation, now lived openly for the family fate had finally given him. They were whole. Thank you for staying with us through this unforgettable journey of Sarah and Dominic. Knowledge reminds us that love can find us in our darkest moments. Lessons teach us that compassion crosses every divide. Education shows us that second chances are real. Knowledge heals old wounds. Lessons build stronger futures. Education opens doors we never knew existed. If this story moved you, please like, subscribe, and share the YouTube channel Alex Truths to enjoy many engaging videos every day. Tell us in the comments, how did this story make you feel? Does it connect to moments in your own life or someone you know? Share your thoughts so we can listen to the emotions deep within your hearts. We wish everyone watching good health, a joyful life, and daily peace. See you in the next video. Disclaimer: all stories on this channel are fictional and created solely for entertainment purposes. Any resemblance to real people, events, or places is purely coincidental.